My name is Rebecca Miller. I'm 67 years old, and my entire life has been about building a home in Portland, Oregon. When I married Edward, we moved into a small house in the suburbs, the place where we raised our only son, Andrew. Edward worked hard for a construction company. He started as a helper, and through persistence and honesty, became a site supervisor. We were never rich, but we were never lacking either. Our home slowly grew over the years, 2 stories and a small backyard where I planted lavender and tomatoes. That garden was my favorite place. I would hang the laundry and hum Frank Sinatra songs Edward loved. Andrew grew up a good boy, maybe a little spoiled being an only child. We poured all our hopes and dreams into him. Edward and I saved so he could attend Portland State University and major in accounting. On graduation day, Edward cried with pride, though he later denied it. After college, Andrew got a job at a large financial firm in Portland. 2 years later, at a company event, he met Melissa, a smart, beautiful woman with a business degree. The first time I met my future daughter-in-law, she was polite but distant, almost cold. Edward told me not to judge too soon. Maybe she was just nervous meeting her in-laws. Their wedding was modest but elegant. At first, Andrew and Melissa lived in an apartment near downtown. They visited me for dinner on weekends. But gradually, those visits became less frequent. Melissa always had an excuse. I have to finish a report. I'm tired. I have a client meeting. Then, 3 years ago, my life took a turn. Edward began to feel weak at first. We thought it was just age, but then the doctor diagnosed stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The next 8 months were hell: hospitals, medication, and watching the man I loved fade away. Andrew came by only a few times, always in a hurry. Melissa showed up twice, once when she heard the diagnosis, and once at the funeral. Edward passed away on a fall night, holding my hand, telling me he was happy because he had me. After he was gone, the house felt unbearably empty. I couldn't sleep for months, clutching the pillow that still carried his scent. Andrew called occasionally, but never had time to visit. Mom, I'm so busy. We've got plans this weekend. Always the same apologies. One afternoon, Andrew and Melissa showed up at my door unexpectedly. My heart raced. I thought my son came to comfort me after my loss. But as they sat on the sofa, their tense expressions made me uneasy. Mom, Andrew began, we've been thinking about you. You shouldn't live alone in such a big house. I'm fine, sweetheart. I smiled. I have my garden and some good neighbors. Melissa cut in, calm but firm. We're planning to have a baby, but our apartment is too small. Andrew nodded, clearly rehearsed. We thought the best solution would be to move in with you. You'd have company, and we'd have more space. I felt both relieved and uneasy. Where would I live then? I asked. Melissa gave a cold smile. We've already thought about that, Mrs. Rebecca. The back terrace is large enough. Andrew will hire someone to build a small room with a private bathroom. You always said you loved sitting out there among the flowers and plants. I froze. This was the house Edward and I had built with our own hands, every wall filled with memories. And now they wanted to move me upstairs, like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the rest of the home. I'll think about it, was all I could say. But deep down, I knew that was the moment my life was about to change. In the weeks that followed, Andrew called every day. He talked about maintenance costs, necessary repairs, and always mentioned that Melissa was choosing colors for the baby's room. It was gentle pressure, but constant. One afternoon, as I stood on the terrace watering the plants, I tried to imagine living up there. The space was open. But the rain blew in. The sun scorched in summer, and in winter, the cold would cut through your bones. With my aching knees, going up and down the stairs every day felt like pure torture. Still, the thought of being close to my son and the grandchild I hoped for comforted me. I told myself it would only be temporary. After many sleepless nights, I agreed. Andrew hugged me tightly and said, "You'll see, Mom. It's going to look beautiful. You'll have your own space, and we'll always be close by." The renovation began the following week. They put up drywall, installed a tiny bathroom, added a separate water tank, and told me I'd love the fresh air. Meanwhile, I quietly packed my things, each item a fragment of 45 years of marriage. Every piece carried a memory. The china set Edward gave me for our 15th anniversary, the Feeful Hards of Very 15, framed photos from our younger days, and the rocking chair where I used to lull Andrew to sleep as a baby. I only brought the essentials, promising myself I'd come back for the rest later. That Saturday morning, as I was picking a few books to take upstairs, I heard Andrew and Melissa come in with a strange man. Their voices carried through the living room. "This wall can come down to make the space feel more open," the man said. "Yes, and right here we could put an island. I've always wanted one," Melissa answered, excited. I stepped out, surprised. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. All three turned to look at me, as if I'd appeared from another time. Andrew cleared his throat. Mom, this is Richard, the architect helping us adjust the house to our new needs." "I see," I said, feeling my stomach tighten. "And what kind of needs require tearing down walls?" Melissa chimed in, that familiar tone of arrogance already showing. "Mrs. Rebecca, we just want to modernize the house a bit. It hasn't been updated in years." "No," I replied firmly. "Edward and I repainted the entire place just 3 years ago." Melissa shrugged. "Yes, but I mean structural changes, not just paint. The kitchen's outdated, and the dining room looks like a museum. We need something more modern." Sensing the tension, Andrew jumped in quickly. "It's just an idea, Mom. Nothing's decided yet." Richard glanced around awkwardly, then excused himself to wait outside. Once it was just the three of us, I looked directly at my son. "Andrew, your father and I built this house with sweat and love. Every corner holds a memory. You two can't just—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. Were they simply waiting for me to die, so they could do whatever they wanted? "Don't say that, Mom," Andrew said, avoiding my eyes. "We just want to make it more comfortable. Besides, you don't need to keep the whole house. You have everything you need upstairs, and we'll take care of the rest." Melissa checked her watch, impatient. "Andrew, we have a lunch reservation at 1:30. Richard's waiting." My son nodded quickly. "We've got to go, Mom. We'll talk later." That afternoon, I sat alone in the room that was about to stop being mine and cried harder than I had since the day Edward died. It felt like I was losing not just my home, but every memory, and the only son I had. The next day, Andrew came alone to help me move my things upstairs. The construction was finished, but the space was much smaller than I expected. My bed barely fit, leaving room for only a small table. The kitchenette had a 2-burner electric stove and a mini fridge. The bathroom was so narrow, I nearly brushed the walls when I turned around. "Cozy, isn't it?" I said, forcing a smile. "You'll get used to it," Andrew replied. "And you can always come downstairs or out to the garden whenever you want." As I unpacked, I noticed the boxes of Edward's belongings I hadn't had the strength to open. I'd kept them in the closet, thinking one day I'd be ready. "What about your father's things?" I asked. Andrew hesitated. I think you should get rid of some of it, Mom. It's been 3 years. We need the extra space. That's your father's stuff, Andrew. I can't throw it away. If you want to keep it, he said coldly, then take it all upstairs. We're going to use that room. Those words cut through me like a knife. It was as if his father's memory had become nothing more than a burden, an obstacle to their plans. That first night on the terrace, I couldn't sleep. The sound of cars on the street, the cold seeping through the cracks in the door, and above all, the feeling of being exiled from my own home. From downstairs came laughter, music, the clinking of glasses they were celebrating, their new home. And I felt like a stranger, an intruder in the place that once was my sanctuary. The days that followed were even worse. Melissa replaced every piece of furniture, throwing out everything Edward and I had chosen so carefully. The family photos vanished from the walls, replaced by lifeless, abstract paintings. Each change felt like a fresh cut to my heart. One morning, I went downstairs to make coffee and discovered they had changed the locks. My key no longer worked. I had to ring the bell like a guest. Melissa opened the door with a fake cheerful smile. "Oh, Mrs. Rebecca, I didn't expect you up so early." "I just wanted to make some coffee," I said, confused. "My key doesn't work." "Yes, we had to change the locks. There have been break-ins in the neighborhood. We'll get you a new key soon." I stepped into the kitchen that once was mine and didn't recognize it anymore. The wall between the kitchen and dining room had been torn down. A modern island stood in the center. Everything brand new, just as Melissa had always dreamed. My old china set was gone. "Where are my dishes?" "Well," I asked, my voice trembling as I tried to stay calm. "We stored them in the basement," she said, without looking up from her phone. "They're too old, they don't fit the new style. You can use these new ones if you want to cook." She pointed to a shelf full of plain white plates, soulless and cold. And at that moment, I knew I was no longer welcome in my own home. I was just a leftover, kept out of obligation. I went back upstairs, carrying my lukewarm coffee, feeling my heart heavier than ever. Looking through the small window at the garden I had tended for so many years, I saw Andrew pulling out all my rose bushes to make space for a barbecue area. Those roses, some planted when he was just a little boy, were tossed aside without a second thought. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly. I didn't want them to see me weak. I had to be strong, just as Edward had always taught me. And then I remembered the boxes of his things that hadn't been brought upstairs. "Tomorrow," I told myself. "I'll bring them up before they throw them out." I had no idea that inside those boxes was something that would change my life forever. The next morning, I woke up early. From the window, I saw Andrew and Melissa leaving the house. Dressed neatly, probably heading to work or a meeting. It was the perfect opportunity to go down and get Edward's things. I waited until their car pulled away, then carefully went downstairs. My knees throbbed with pain, but my determination was stronger than my body. At the front door, I remembered the new lock. They still hadn't given me the new key as promised. Thankfully, the back door that opened to the garden still used the old lock. They must not have changed it yet. I slipped inside, feeling like a thief in my own home. Inside, almost nothing was familiar anymore. In just a few weeks, they had completely transformed the living and dining rooms. The oak dining table Edward had bought in North Carolina was gone, replaced by sharp-edged, modern, lifeless furniture. The lace curtains I'd sewn by hand were replaced with shiny, metal blinds. Even the floor was different cold tiles that echoed with every step I took. I walked to our old bedroom now, Andrew and Melissa's master suite. When I opened the door, my chest tightened. The bed where Edward had spent his final days was gone. In its place stood a king-size bed covered with cold, gray silk sheets. The walnut wardrobe Edward had built with his own hands had been replaced by a built-in closet with silver-plated mirrors. I panicked. Looking around, Edward's boxes were nowhere to be seen. Where did they put them? I whispered, my heart pounding fast. I searched the whole room under the bed, inside the tame, new closet, even the adjoining bathroom. Nothing. I walked out to the hallway and into the room that used to be Andrew's when he was a child. Now it was being painted for the baby, pale yellow walls half finished, furniture piled in a corner. Nothing of Edward's there either. I went down to the basement, the place we used to store seasonal items and gardening tools. The air was damp, the light dim. In the corner, a stack of old cardboard boxes caught my eye, Edward's things. But what shocked me was how few there were. Before moving upstairs, there had been at least 8 large boxes. Now only 3 remained, opened and rummaged through, as if someone had been searching for something specific. What did they do with Edward's things? Did they throw them away without asking me? I dropped to my knees and opened each box. Inside were only a few old books, some tools, scattered papers, and clothes they hadn't bothered to sell or give away. Amid the papers, I found our wedding album. The old photos came alive, Edward and me, young and glowing, surrounded by relatives, most of whom were gone now. I touched the picture of Edward in his rented suit, that shy smile I had loved so deeply. I miss you so much, I whispered, tears falling again. I sat on an empty box to rest, thinking about how to carry the boxes upstairs. I couldn't take them all at once. My body was weak, my knees aching, so I decided to bring them up little by little. While I was choosing a few important things, the front door opened. My heart tightened. They were home earlier than expected. I quickly grabbed the album and some papers, shoved them into a plastic bag, and hid behind a wooden shelf. I told you, the papers must be somewhere in that room. I heard Andrew's voice echo down. You always lose things. Melissa snapped, annoyed. Did you check the basement? We dumped a bunch of your parents' stuff. Down there. Stored, not dumped, Andrew corrected reluctantly. Anyway, we need those documents for the lawyer. A lawyer? What kind of documents were they looking for so urgently? Check down here, I'll look in the office, Melissa said. I heard Andrew's footsteps coming closer. He switched on the basement light and began digging through the very boxes I'd just opened. Mom always kept everything organized. It has to be here somewhere, he muttered to himself. After a few minutes, Melissa called out, Andrew, I think I found something in the office. Be right there, he replied, leaving everything in disarray before heading upstairs and locking the basement door behind him. I waited a few minutes to make sure they were gone, then stepped out from my hiding place. My heart was pounding with both fear and curiosity. What documents were they desperate to find? And why was a lawyer involved? I crept up the stairs toward their office, the same room Edward once used to manage household expenses, now turned into Andrew's private workspace. The door was slightly open, and I could hear their conversation clearly inside. Here it is, Melissa said smugly. The property title. Are you sure this is the original? Andrew asked. Positive. It's got the seal and the notary's signature. With this and Dad's death certificate, Andrew murmured. The lawyer can start the ownership transfer. And what if Mom refuses to sign? He asked, his voice uneasy. We don't need her signature, darling, Melissa replied coldly, sending chills down my spine. The house was in your father's name. Now that he's gone, you're the legal heir. Your mother has no legal right to this property. I had to bite my lip to keep from gasping. How could this be? Edward and I had bought this house together with every penny of our savings. Yes, his name was the only one on the deed back. Then, everything was usually in the husband's name, but Edward had always said this house belonged to both of us. I don't feel right about this, Andrew said softly, his voice trembling. This is Mom's home, too. It's family property, Melissa replied coldly. And now that we're having a baby, we need to secure our assets. Besides, we've already given her a place to live that's more than most people would do. Maybe you're right, Andrew sighed. The lawyer said everything's legal. Of course it's legal, Melissa said confidently. And once the house is officially in your name, we can take out a loan to remodel everything. But what if Mom finds out? Andrew asked, still uneasy. She's living up on the terrace with her little pension. She's got nowhere else to go. If she doesn't like it, she can move into a nursing home. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. They weren't just plotting to steal the house Edward and I had built with our own hands. They were ready to throw me into a nursing home if I dared to resist. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Come on, Melissa said. Our appointment with the lawyer is at 11 o'clock. I don't want to be late. But what if Mom notices the title's missing? Andrew asked. She doesn't even know it exists. And even if she does, so what? The law's on our side. I heard them gather the papers and get ready to leave. I slipped quickly into the kitchen, opened the back door, and climbed up the outdoor stairs to the terrace. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. When I reached my small room, I sat heavily on the bed, trying to process what I had just heard. My son Andrew was planning to take away the home that Edward and I had spent our entire lives building. And the worst part was that the law seemed to be on their side. I sat there for hours, numb, crying one moment, shaking with anger the next. At dinner, I heard Andrew's voice calling from downstairs. Mom, do you want to come down and eat with us? For a second, I almost ran down and confronted them, but then I stopped myself. If they realized I knew, they might speed up their plan, or worse, actually put me in a nursing home. I needed time to think, to make a plan. No, sweetheart, I answered, keeping my voice steady. I've got a bit of a headache. I think I'll turn in early. As you wish, Andrew said. I could hear the relief in his voice. We'll save you some dinner, in case you change your mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of Edward and our life together came flooding back. I remembered the nights we worked extra hours to pay off the mortgage, the weekends we spent painting each room ourselves to save money, the mornings planting flowers in the garden as the sun came up. This house belonged to both of us. How could I possibly have no right to it? Over time, my despair gave way to a quiet but fierce determination I thought I had lost. Edward once told me I was stronger than I believed. He called me an oak tree disguised as a flower. I won't let them take what's mine, I whispered into the dark. There must be a way. Some kind of proof that this house belongs to me too. And then, as if Edward himself were whispering in my ear, I remembered the bottom drawer of his old desk, the one he always kept locked. When he was sick, he'd given me a small set of keys and said, all the answers you'll ever need are in here. At the time, I was too heartbroken to care. That set of keys had stayed in a small box beside my bed. Only now did I finally understand what Edward meant. I sat up suddenly, my heart pounding. Was that desk still in the house? I hadn't seen it that morning, but I hadn't checked everywhere yet. I'll find it, I told myself. Tomorrow, I'll search every corner of this house until I find Edward's desk. And when I do, they'll see who the law truly stands with. With that thought, I lay back down. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I didn't know what was inside that drawer, but I was determined to find out for Edward, for myself, and for the truth. The next morning, I woke with a clear purpose. I listened to the sounds in the house until I heard Andrew's car pull away. Once I was sure they had gone, I quietly went downstairs through the back door. I carried the ring of keys Edward had left me and was determined to find the desk. I searched room after room. It wasn't in the office, nor the bedroom, not the dining room or the living room. Melissa had remodeled everything. I began to worry. What if they'd thrown it out, too? That desk, Edward had bought it at an antique auction in Portland when Andrew was still a little boy. It was made of solid walnut, beautifully carved, full of drawers, a timeless piece, sturdier than the loyalty of my only son. After searching the entire house with no luck, the only place left was the garage, a space Edward and I had rarely used for parking, since he always preferred to leave the car on the street. Over the years, the garage had become a storage space filled with old things, items we didn't use anymore but couldn't bring ourselves to throw away. When I opened the rusty door, my heart nearly stopped. There it was, hidden under a dust-covered sheet, surrounded by worn-out cardboard boxes. Edward's desk. They had treated it like junk, tossing it aside with the rest of my life's memories. I approached it reverently, pulled away the dusty cover, and gently ran my hand over the wood, the same surface I used to polish every week with beeswax for him. Even beneath the dust, it was still beautiful. I remembered all the times Edward sat at that desk, paying bills, writing letters, or simply sipping his Sunday morning coffee while reading the newspaper. I opened each drawer. The top ones were empty, clearly. Andrew and Melissa had gone through them. But the smallest drawer in the center was still locked. The brass keyhole was engraved with tiny oak leaves. My hands trembled as I tried each key on Edward's old keyring. Finally, a small gold one fit perfectly. I turned it gently. Click! The sound of the lock opening made my heart tighten with emotion. Inside was a pale yellow envelope. My name, Rebecca, written in Edward's familiar handwriting. I picked it up, hands shaking, and opened it. Inside was a letter and a thick stack of documents. The letter began with tender words. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I hope you never have to open this drawer, that our life together is long enough for these papers to become meaningless. But I've always been a careful man, and there are things you need to know. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Edward had been looking out for me years in advance. In the letter, he explained that although the house had originally been registered in his name, he had later filed legal paperwork to add my name to the property documents. Attached to the letter was a notarized will in which Edward left all his assets, including the house, to me. There was also a newer copy of the property title, clearly stating that Edward and Rebecca Miller were joint owners. But that wasn't all. Among the stack of documents, I also found deeds for 2 plots of land in the suburbs, shares in a small construction company, and a secret bank account Edward had opened years earlier. In the letter, he wrote, I opened this account the day our son, Andrew, was born. Each month, I deposited a little for our future, for our peaceful old age. I planned to surprise you when I retired, so we could travel through Europe, just like you always dreamed. Life didn't give me that chance, but now it's all yours. Use it wisely, my love. At the end of the letter, his handwriting was shakier, probably written during his final, weaker days. I trust our son will take care of you as we took care of him. But if he doesn't, these papers will give you the freedom and independence you deserve. You are stronger than you think. Rebecca, I love you forever. Edward. Sitting on the cold garage floor, I broke down in tears, holding tightly to the last remnants of the man I loved. Even after death, he was still protecting and loving me. Amid the tears, a new strength rose within me. I was no longer helpless, no longer a victim in the hands of my son and daughter-in-law. I now had proof and a choice. I carefully placed all the papers back into the envelope and brought it to my small room on the terrace. I needed time to think, to plan. That afternoon, Andrew appeared unexpectedly. He climbed the stairs, slightly out of breath, trying to sound cheerful but unable to hide his unease. "Mom, how are you? Haven't seen you much lately." "I'm fine," I replied calmly, hiding the envelope under my pillow. "I'm just still getting used to this new way of living." "It's for your own good," he said, repeating a phrase I had grown to despise. "At your age, living alone isn't safe. With us here, you'll be taken care of." I almost laughed. Take care of me by sending me to the terrace and taking over my house. But I stayed calm. "Yes, maybe you're right," I nodded. "Oh, by the way, have you seen your father's desk? I'd like to get back a few keepsakes." Andrew stiffened slightly. "The old desk? It's probably still in the garage, but there's nothing important in it. We already went through everything." "All the drawers?" I thought to myself, but only smiled. "That's fine. I just want to look at it, to remember him." "Of course, Mom. I'll bring it up for you sometime." "No rush," I said, quietly savoring the feeling of silent victory. "Oh, and how's the renovation plan going? Melissa mentioned taking out a loan?" Andrew's eyes widened. "A loan? No, that was just an idea. Nothing definite." "I see," I said softly. "A big house like this must be expensive to remodel." Andrew quickly changed the subject. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something serious. This weekend, we're hosting a small dinner party, just some friends and coworkers, sort of a housewarming." "Sounds nice," I said. "It's been a while since we've entertained guests." Andrew cleared his throat, looking uneasy. "Actually, Melissa thinks it would be better if you weren't there that night." "What did you just say, Andrew?" I asked, though my heart already knew. "If you could just stay up here while the dinner's going on," he said softly, avoiding my eyes. "Melissa wants to make a good impression on her boss, and she thinks it might be hard to explain that you live with us." It felt like being slapped across the face. It was one thing for them to banish me to the terrace, cutting me off from daily life in my own home. But this wanting to hide me away, as if I were something shameful, unfit to be seen, was something else entirely. "Hard to explain?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "Hard to explain that your mother, the woman who gave you life, who gave up her career to raise you, who built this very home with your father so you could live comfortably, still exists? That's what's hard to explain, Andrew?" "That's not what I meant, Mom," he stammered, his face flushing. "It's just that Melissa wants to make a good impression, and I don't fit that image, do I?" I cut him off, my tone icy. "I'm not elegant enough, not refined enough for your new friends. Is that it? Please, try to understand," he pleaded. Her boss might be considering her for a promotion. I looked at my son, the boy I once held close every time he fell, who now could ask me to disappear like a source of shame. When had Andrew become the kind of man who placed his wife's ambition above the simplest duty of respect for his own mother? "Fine," I said, strangely calm. "I'll stay up here. No one needs to know I exist." Andrew exhaled in relief, oblivious that every word he spoke cut deeper into my heart. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. We'll bring you some food afterward." "No need," I said dryly. "I wouldn't want your guests wondering why someone's carrying a plate up to the terrace." The sarcasm flew right past. "You're right. Maybe just prepare something for yourself ahead of time." He stood up, clearly relieved to have solved the problem. He leaned down and kissed my cheek out of habit, not affection. "We love you, Mom," he said, but the words were hollow, empty. As the door closed behind him, I watched it silently. Sadness and fury collided inside me like a storm. The pain of being rejected by my own child squeezed my heart. But beneath that pain, something else began to rise. Strength, determination. A spark I thought had long since died. Edward had been right. I was stronger than I believed, and it was time to prove it. I took the envelope from under my pillow and reread every document Edward had left behind. Each page reminded me of the power and worth I had forgotten. I would no longer be the victim. I would not let anyone erase me from my own life or from the home I had spent my life building. "This ends here," I said aloud, like a vow to Edward, to myself, and to the woman I was finding again. If you've ever been pushed aside, treated as invisible after once being indispensable, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Life tests us sometimes, but it's those very tests that remind us of our true value. If you want to know how I faced what came next, keep reading. I promise. The rest of the story will surprise you even more than it did me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the documents I'd found in Edward's secret drawer, organizing a plan, calculating each step. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. When the first light of dawn filtered through the small terrace window, I had made a clear decision. I wasn't going to act in haste. Edward once said, "The most lasting victories are those won with patience and strategy." The first thing I needed was legal advice. Among the stack of papers, I found an old business card belonging to attorney Michael Harris, a man who had worked with Edward for many years. Was he still practicing law? There was only one way to find out. I waited until Andrew and Melissa left for work, then walked downstairs. This time, I didn't sneak around like an intruder. I walked straight, head held high, knowing I had every right to be there, perhaps even more than they did. I looked for the landline, surprisingly. It was still in its place. I didn't dare use my cell phone, since Andrew might check my call history. With how controlling he'd become lately, I couldn't rule it out. My hands trembled as I dialed the number on the card. After a few rings, a soft female voice answered. "Harris and Associates Law Office. Good morning." A wave of relief washed over me. The office still existed. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd like to speak with attorney Michael Harris, please." There was a brief pause. "May I ask who's calling?" "This is Rebecca Miller, the widow of Edward Miller." A longer silence followed. "Please, hold a moment," she said. I waited, my heart pounding. After what felt like an eternity, a deep, calm male voice came through the phone. "Mrs. Miller? This is Michael Harris. What a surprise to hear from you after all these years." "Mr. Harris," I breathed out. "I wasn't sure you were still working there." "I've been here for over 30 years, ma'am," he replied warmly. "I'm very sorry I wasn't able to reach you after Edward passed away. I tried several times, but never received a response." I frowned. "You tried to reach me? I never got any letters or messages from you." "I sent several letters to your address," Mr. Harris said thoughtfully, "and I called the number I had on file. A young man always answered, said he was your son. He promised to pass along my messages." A chill ran down my spine. Andrew had deliberately blocked every contact between me and my husband's lawyer. "How long has he been planning to take the house, Mr. Harris?" I asked, forcing myself to stay calm. "I just found some documents Edward left behind. I believe I need your help as soon as possible." "Of course," he said. "You can come to my office today. I'll see you this afternoon." Thank you, I replied, feeling a faint spark of hope. Could you give me the address? I carefully wrote it down on a small piece of paper, folded it, and tucked it into my pocket before hanging up. Inside, I felt a sharp sense of purpose. The next step was to leave the house without raising suspicion. I didn't want Andrew or Melissa to know I was meeting a lawyer, not yet. I returned to the small room on the terrace and dressed more carefully than usual. I chose a simple yet elegant navy blue dress, the same one I used to wear when I taught at a high school in Oregon. I brushed my hair neatly, applied a bit of powder and light lipstick to hide my fatigue. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the fragile, defeated woman of the past few months, but a stronger version, the woman I used to be. I took the envelope containing the documents and placed it inside a beige canvas bag, the last gift Edward had given me on our 40th anniversary. Then, as quietly as possible, I went down the outdoor stairs and stepped through the garden door. On the bed, I left a small note. I'm going to the market. We'll be back in the afternoon. The road to Mr. Harris's office was longer than I expected. I took a taxi. Even though I knew I was spending what little money I had left to save. But at this point, I had no other choice. Through the car window, I watched the city of Portland pass by, changed so much it was almost unrecognizable. Since Edward's passing, I had rarely gone out. Many streets didn't even look familiar anymore. Harris and Associates was in Infarit, old red brick building, still holding on to a classic, dignified charm. When I walked in, a young receptionist smiled warmly and led me straight to the attorney's office. Mr. Harris, about 60, with salt and pepper hair and thick-rimmed glasses, stood up and greeted me with a firm handshake. Mrs. Miller, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you. Mr. Edwards spoke about you often. You knew my husband? I asked, surprised. Not just as a client, he said with a nostalgic smile, but as a friend. And, at times, a collaborator on certain legal matters. He was a wonderful man, cautious, honest, and deeply devoted to his family. His words caught in my throat. It was comforting to know Edward was still remembered with the respect he deserved. He invited me to sit down and poured me a cup of hot coffee. I thanked him, then, with trembling hands, took the envelope from my bag and placed the documents on his desk. I found these yesterday, in a hidden drawer of Edward's desk. It seems he prepared far more than I ever realized. Attorney Harris carefully reviewed each page, occasionally nodding. After a few minutes, he looked up and smiled reassuringly. Mrs. Miller, your husband was incredibly thorough. All of these documents are valid and legally binding. The house is jointly owned by you and him. The will is perfectly legitimate, and the other assets, the land, shares, and investments, are clearly documented. He paused, flipping through a few more pages before adding, in fact, those investments have generated quite a bit of profit over the past few years. Profit? I asked, surprised. I've never received any money. The lawyer frowned. That's strange. According to the records, dividend payments have been deposited quarterly into a separate account. Edward opened. A chill ran down my spine. It was the same account mentioned in his letter, the one I had just discovered last night. Mr. Harris looked at me, his expression turning serious. Mrs. Miller, I think we should check that account. Right now, if you agree, I'll call the bank. I nodded, my heart pounding with both hope and fear. He made the call, introduced himself as my legal representative, and provided the necessary information from the file. After a few minutes of conversation and verification, his face shifted from focused to stunned, and finally to restrained outrage. When he hung up, he looked straight into my eyes. Mrs. Miller, that account is still active, and the current balance is, He paused to be sure. Over $1.2 million. My mouth fell open. $1,200,000? Yes, he said slowly. Mr. Edward was a very wise investor. The construction company he owned shares in has grown tremendously over the past decade. The profits and dividends have been accumulating for years. I almost whispered, I never knew. I never even touched that money. Mr. Harris's voice turned firm. And that's exactly what's most concerning. According to the bank, the account has 2 authorized holders, and the second person has been making regular withdrawals for the past 2 years. My heart seemed to stop. 2 people listed? Who? He looked up, his eyes apologetic. Your son, Andrew Miller. That news hit me like a bucket of cold water. Not only did Andrew know about the account, he had been quietly using that money for 2 years without telling me. How much had he withdrawn? What had it been spent on? For renovations? For that new SUV last year? How? How could this happen? I whispered, my voice reduced to a breath. I never authorized my son to be a joint holder on that account. Attorney Harris reviewed the file and frowned. Based on these documents, Mr. Edward left very clear instructions. You are the sole owner of that account. For Andrew to gain access, someone must have forged your signature on the bank paperwork. The room spun around me. My own son, the child I had loved and trusted with my whole heart, had been stealing from me for 2 years. Not only trying to take the house, he had drained the money Edward had saved for our old age and my security. What am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice choking, sounding hardly like myself. You have options, Harris said firmly. We can file a criminal complaint for fraud against your son. We can freeze the account immediately, demand an audit of all transactions, and formally confirm your legal ownership of the house. Those words whirled in my head. To accuse my own child of fraud, the thought pierced me like a knife, but the betrayal was too great to ignore. I need time to think, I said softly. Let's start by protecting the house and the account, without involving the police, at least for now. Of course. Harris nodded sympathetically. We can proceed cautiously. First, I'll get the account access transferred fully into your name. Then we'll complete the legal paperwork to confirm you as the sole owner of the house. But I must warn you, your son likely won't accept this easily. I know, I replied, my throat tight. But I can't let him keep treating me this way. Edward would never have accepted it. He certainly would not, Harris said decisively. He always spoke of you with respect and love. If he were alive, he would be proud that you're standing up for yourself. Those words gave me strength. That afternoon, we prepared the documents needed to protect my legal assets. Mr. Harris explained each step carefully, making sure I understood my rights and options. When I left the office, the sun was beginning to set. I carried notarized copies of every paper, and the promise that the account would be transferred within days. At the same time, the process to confirm my ownership of the house had been set in motion. Riding home in the taxi, I felt a strange mix of emotions: hurt from betrayal, anger at the theft, but also a newfound strength and faith. For the first time in years, I felt I was taking back control of my life. When I arrived home, I saw Andrew's car parked at the gate. I took a deep breath, steeling myself to act normal. This was not the moment for confrontation. I needed everything legally secured before I made my move. I entered through the garden door, avoiding both of them, and went straight up to the terrace. Once in my room, I hid all the documents inside an empty cookie tin under the bed, a place no one would ever think to look. I sat down, completely drained, both body and soul. What I had discovered today weighed heavily on me, yet beneath that exhaustion flickered a faint light hope. Edward. I whispered into the air, as if he could still hear me. Thank you for protecting me, even when you're no longer here. I won't let you down. The tears I shed that night were no longer tears of sorrow, but tears of determination. The fragile, submissive woman of past years was gone. In her place stood a new Rebecca, strong, decisive, refusing to be dismissed or pushed aside ever again. It's time to take my life back, I told myself, looking up at the star-filled sky through the small window. And may God have mercy on Andrew when he discovers what I found in his father's final drawer. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. All through the restless night, I had crafted a detailed plan. I would not act out of anger or vengeance, but with the wisdom and patience Edward had always taught me. The first step was to ensure every legal process was completed before confronting Andrew. Attorney Harris had promised that by the weekend, all the paperwork and account transfers would be finalized. All I needed to do was buy time and maintain appearances. That morning, I decided to go downstairs for breakfast with Andrew and Melissa, something I had rarely done since being exiled to the terrace. When I stepped into the kitchen, both of them turned to me in surprise. "Mom," Andrew exclaimed, "I didn't expect you to be up so early." I smiled as naturally as I could. I slept well. I think I'm finally getting used to the new place. Melissa, who was making coffee, shot me a cold glance and said, "That's great, Mrs. Miller. Would you like to have breakfast with us?" "If it's not a bother," I said, sitting at the table that once belonged to me. A heavy silence filled the kitchen as Melissa poured the coffee and Andrew scrolled through his phone. I suddenly realized they looked like strangers in the very home Edward and I had built together. "So," Andrew finally said, breaking the silence, "where did you go yesterday? I came up to get you for lunch, but you weren't there." "I went to the market," I replied calmly, repeating the excuse from the note I had left. "I needed some fresh air and a little walk." "The market?" Melissa asked, her tone skeptical. "Then what did you buy? I didn't see you bring anything back." I had anticipated that question. "Just a few herbs for tea. I left them on the terrace." Andrew nodded, seeming to accept my answer, but I noticed Melissa's eyes were sharper than usual. That woman missed nothing. I knew I had to be more cautious than ever. "Don't forget, the dinner party with my boss is this Saturday," Melissa said, changing the subject. "All the guests have confirmed. 8 people in total." "That's wonderful," I said, sipping my coffee. "Do you need any help?" Melissa nearly choked on her drink. "No, thank you, Mrs. Miller. We've already hired catering." "Of course," I said with a faint smile. "I forgot. My cooking probably doesn't match the sophistication of your guests. We just want you to rest and stay up on the terrace so they don't see you." "I understand perfectly." "Mom, don't say that," Andrew protested weakly. "What should I say?" I replied, voice innocently affected. "That I'll be locked in a room while you pretend I don't exist? Does that sound better to you?" A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Melissa glanced at Andrew, signaling him to handle the situation. Andrew sighed. "You're overreacting, Mom. Nobody is forcing you to lock yourself away. It's just one evening, and it's important for Melissa's career." "Of course," I answered, nodding slowly. "Melissa's career is always top priority." "Mrs. Miller," Melissa interjected, voice tense, "if you find this arrangement inconvenient, we can look for another solution. There are many lovely nursing homes in the city, and so the veiled threat I'd overheard before was repeated that they would put me in a nursing home if I became a burden. In the past, such words might have crushed me, made me beg them not to abandon me. But now, After learning the financial and legal truth, I felt only a cold calm, even a touch of irony. A nursing home? I echoed, as if pondering sincerely. That sounds interesting. Maybe I should consider it. After all, this house is full of memories, I added, and not all memories are pleasant. Andrew and Melissa stared at each other, stunned. They had expected tears and pleading from me, not this composed demeanor. No rush, Mom, Andrew said awkwardly. For now, things are fine, right? Perhaps, I said, standing up. Thanks for the coffee. You two carry on with your day. As I left the kitchen, I felt Andrew and Melissa's eyes on my back. My performance had unsettled them exactly as I wanted. I needed to sow doubt, to distract, to buy time. Up in my room, I immediately called attorney Michael Harris on my mobile. At this point, I didn't care whether Andrew would check my call history because soon he would know the whole truth. Good morning, Mr. Harris, I said when he answered. Any news about my case? I was about to call you, Mrs. Miller, he replied cheerfully. The bank processed the request remarkably quickly. The account is now solely in your name, and we've blocked all unauthorized access. That fast? I asked, surprised. It seems your husband had very good relations at the bank, he said, a note of pride in his voice. Also, when I mentioned the possibility of litigation for fraudulent transactions, they were especially cooperative. I couldn't help smiling. And the house? I asked. We filed the original documents with the notary, he said. For the land and the investments, everything is being verified and updated. If there are no obstacles, by Friday this week the entire process should be complete. Wonderful, I replied, picturing the Saturday dinner in my head, the perfect moment for the final confrontation. After hanging up, I sat down at the table and began rewriting my plans step by step. I needed to prepare for every possible reaction once Andrew and Melissa learned the truth. I knew my son too well. First, he would deny everything, then try to justify himself, and when cornered, he would play on my emotions to manipulate me. As for Melissa, she would drop the polite mask and reveal her true nature. I also had to think about what my life would look like after it was all over. Would I even want to stay in this house, a place filled with betrayal, or should I start anew somewhere peaceful? That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Visit my old friend, Carla. She had been a colleague when I taught at a high school in Oregon. After Edward passed away, we saw each other less often, but we still kept in touch. I needed to talk to someone I could trust, someone with no stake in this mess. Carla lived a few blocks away, in a cozy little apartment she shared with her sister. When she opened the door and saw me, her face lit up with surprise and joy. Rebecca, how wonderful to see you! Come in, come in. Her small living room was filled with books and plants, a perfect reflection of her curious, vibrant spirit. Though nearly my age, she was still quick and lively, pouring tea and inviting me to sit, just like old friends catching up after years apart. You look different, Carla said after a few minutes of conversation. There's something in your eyes, a spark I haven't seen in a long time. I smiled. Carla had always been perceptive. A lot has happened, my friend. Too much to fit into one afternoon. But I told her anyway, everything. The story of the terrace room, the secret documents, and Andrew's betrayal. I didn't hold back a single detail, not even the parts that broke my heart. I needed to pour out all the pain and anger I had kept inside. Carla listened intently, interrupting only to ask questions or express outrage. When I finished, she grasped my hand firmly and said, Rebecca, what they did to you is unforgivable. Your son, I never would have believed Andrew could turn into this. He used to be such a good young man. I used to think so too, I admitted. I wonder if he was always like this and I just didn't see it. or if Melissa changed him. People do change, Carla said thoughtfully. Some change for the worse. But you've changed for the better. You're stronger, clearer. I feel like I've just woken up from a long sleep, I said. When Edward died, part of my soul died with him. I let Andrew make every decision. Let him push me out of my own life, but not anymore. What will you do after you confront them? Carla asked. Will you keep living with them? I don't think so, I replied. That house holds too much pain now. I'm thinking, maybe I'll sell it and buy a smaller place, just for me. You know you're always welcome in my home, Carla said gently. Thank you, my dear friend, I replied. But I need to be fully independent. I want to take back control of my life. Carla nodded in understanding. You're steering your own ship again, Rebecca. Edward would be so proud of you. Those words brought a lump to my throat. Sometimes I feel like he's still guiding me, you know, as if he foresaw everything and left me the tools to fight. Edward was a wise man, Carla smiled. And you're stronger than you think. You always have been. I returned home with a lighter heart. That conversation with Carla cleared my thoughts and strengthened my resolve. Now I had no doubts left about what I needed to do. The following days passed in an uneasy calm. I continued to play the part of the obedient, resigned mother while quietly perfecting every detail of my plan. I met again with attorney Michael Harris to review all the paperwork and discuss how Andrew might react. There's a chance he'll respond aggressively, he warned. Not physically, but possibly with threats or harsh words. I'm ready, I assured him. The night before the confrontation, I went over every document once more. Everything was in order. The bank account was now solely in my name, with a verified balance of more than $1.2 million. The deed for the house and land had been updated, listing me as the sole legal owner. The shares in the construction company Edward had invested in were confirmed, and their value was considerable. I lay down, feeling a strange peace. Tomorrow would change everything forever, but I wasn't afraid anymore. In fact, I was looking forward to it. Edward, I whispered into the darkness, tomorrow I'll claim justice for you, for me, and for everything we built together. I promise I won't waste the second chance you gave me. With that promise on my lips, I drifted into sleep dreaming, for the first time in years, of a bright and boundless future. Friday morning dawned clear and radiant, as if the sky itself was blessing my determination. I prepared carefully, choosing the navy blue dress Edward once admired, putting on light makeup and neatly pinning my hair. I wanted to look elegant, confident, and worthy of the moment ahead. Before going downstairs, I double-checked all the documents Mr. Harris had sent. Everything was flawless. I also confirmed my afternoon appointment at his office, where I would sign the final papers securing all my assets. When I entered the kitchen, I found Melissa sitting alone, sipping coffee and absorbed in her phone. She looked up, startled for a second when she saw how neatly dressed I was. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," she said, her eyes sweeping over me with curiosity. "You look different today." "Good morning, Melissa," I replied softly. "I have a few errands to take care of downtown." "What kind of errands?" she asked, unable to hide her suspicion. I smiled, mysteriously. "Just personal matters, nothing for you to worry about." I noticed her expression shift from disdain to caution. The woman who once saw me as a frail, harmless old lady was now looking at me with a flicker of unease. "Has Andrew already left for work?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Yes, very early. Important meeting," she answered, still watching me closely. "But he'll be back around noon to get things ready for tomorrow's dinner." "Ah, that famous dinner," I said, with a trace of irony in my tone. Must be quite important to you, isn't it? Melissa straightened in her chair, her voice defensive. Very important. The company's vice president will be there. If everything goes well, I might finally get the promotion I deserve. I wish you good luck, I said sincerely. In any case, I no longer felt resentment, only calm before the coming storm. Melissa was ambitious and calculating, but the one who truly betrayed me was my own son. I finished my cup of coffee in silence, aware of Melissa's watchful eyes following my every move. Finally, I stood up and set the cup in the sink. I'll be out for the day. Back this afternoon, I said, heading toward the door. No need to prepare lunch for me. Wait, Melissa spoke up, standing as well. Where are you going? Andrew told me to keep an eye on you. I stopped and looked straight into her eyes. For the first time since we met, I didn't lower my gaze. Thank you for your concern, Melissa, I said slowly. But I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I don't need anyone supervising me. Her face showed a mix of surprise and irritation. Clearly, she wasn't used to me speaking so firmly. I was just asking, she muttered, then looked back down at her phone, as if the matter were trivial. I walked out of the house feeling an unfamiliar lightness. That seemingly small exchange was, in truth, the first real step toward reclaiming myself. I was no longer the frail, obedient woman who followed orders. I was a woman taking back control of her own life. I took a taxi to downtown Portland. The first stop was the bank where Edward had once opened the secret account. I needed to see for myself that I truly had control over that money, the money my son had quietly been spending all this time. The bank manager came out personally when he heard my name. He was a man in his 40s, with a polite smile and a professional demeanor. Mrs. Miller, it's a pleasure to meet you, he said, shaking my hand. Your husband was a highly valued client here. He led me into a private office, poured coffee and water, and set a folder with my name on it on the table. As your attorney likely mentioned, he explained, the account has now been fully transferred to your name. We've also blocked all unauthorized access attempts. Why do you say attempts? Has someone tried? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The manager nodded, his expression serious. Yes. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. Andrew Miller attempted to withdraw $50,000. Of course, the transaction was declined. A chill ran through me. $50,000? For what? Perhaps for tomorrow night's dinner party, or some other luxury he planned to fund with my money. How did my son react when he was denied? I asked calmly. He was displeased, the manager replied tactfully. He insisted there must be a system error. When informed that the account ownership had changed, he appeared quite shocked. I could picture it vividly. Andrew had never been accustomed to hearing the word no. Was he told that I was the one who authorized the transfer? We followed your and your attorney's exact instructions, he said. We simply stated that the account ownership had changed and that he no longer had transaction privileges. Excellent. I nodded with satisfaction. I'd like to review the transaction history for the past few years. The manager quickly pulled up the records on his computer and turned the screen toward me. The numbers before my eyes left me utterly stunned. Over the 3 years since Edward's passing, Andrew had been withdrawing money from the account regularly at first, just a few $1,000s, which could be excused as funeral or administrative expenses. But as time went on, the withdrawals grew larger and more frequent. Last year alone, he took out more than $300,000. Expenses for trips to Hawaii, designer shopping, car payments, interior design fees, all clearly listed on the statements. As you can see, the manager said, your son has been using this account as his personal one. The dividends from your husband's investments were deposited, and he spent them almost immediately. If those withdrawals hadn't been made, how much would the account hold now? I asked, my voice a mix of anger and pain. The manager tapped a few numbers, then replied, about $1.7 million, including both principal and interest. I clenched my fists. $500,000. That was how much my son had wasted while forcing me to live in a sweltering attic, believing he was taking care of me. Would you like to make any transactions today, Mrs. Miller? The manager asked, pulling me back from my thoughts. Yes, I said, after a brief silence. I want to open a completely separate account and transfer $200,000 into it. Of course, he nodded. Any special requests? Yes. I'd like a debit card that's active today. It took us nearly an hour to complete the paperwork. When I left the bank, a brand new card was in my purse. And in my heart was a feeling I thought I had lost forever freedom. My next stop was a real estate office I passed along the way. I hadn't made an appointment, but the receptionist welcomed me warmly when I mentioned I was looking for an apartment to rent. Any specific requirements? Asked the agent. A middle-aged woman named Patricia Evans. I just want somewhere comfortable and quiet, I replied. Preferably near downtown or close to Washington Park. Something small just for me. Patricia smiled, opened her computer, and showed me a series of bright, cozy apartments, each one full of promise for my new beginning. One listing instantly caught my attention, a second-floor apartment in a well-kept old building, with large windows, a small balcony, and a view near the park. This one looks perfect, I said. Can I see it today? Let me call the landlord, Patricia replied. She lives in the same building and might be available. Luckily, the landlord was home and agreed to meet us right away. 30 minutes later, I was completely smitten. The apartment was small but charming, with high ceilings and gleaming wooden floors. The walls needed paint, and the kitchen was dated. But it had soul, character, and most importantly, it offered the independence I had longed for. I want to rent it, I said without hesitation. When can I move in? The landlord, an elderly woman named Dolores Harper, smiled kindly. As soon as we sign the lease and I receive the deposit, the place is yours. Even today, if you'd like. Perfect, I replied, my heart swelling with a joy I hadn't felt in years. Shall we sign now? We returned to the agency, reviewed, and signed the rental contract. I paid the deposit and first month's rent with my new bank card. The feeling of completing a transaction on my own for the first time in years left me speechless. Here are your keys, Mrs. Miller, Dolores said, handing them to me with a warm smile. Welcome to the building, our newest neighbor. I gripped the set of keys tightly in my hand, feeling the weight of the freedom I had just reclaimed. From now on, I would no longer have to live cramped in an attic, no longer have to ask permission just to exist in my own home. This small apartment would be my refuge, the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I checked my watch. There were still 2 hours left before my appointment with attorney Michael Harris. I decided to use the time to buy a few essentials for the apartment. I wasn't planning to move in immediately. I still had to face Andrew first, but I wanted everything ready for that day. I stopped by a nearby store and bought bed linens, towels, some kitchen utensils, and cleaning supplies. Then I went to the supermarket and picked up dry goods and basic groceries. Every single item, no matter how small, felt like a step closer to freedom. I brought everything back to the apartment, arranged it neatly, then stood in the middle of the room, looking around, imagining how I would decorate it. I would have lots of plants, plenty of them. Maybe I'd even adopt a little cat for company. All those possibilities filled my heart with hope. After that, I headed to Mr. Harris's office. When I walked in, he greeted me with a pleased smile. "Mrs. Miller, you look radiant today." "I truly feel radiant, sir," I replied with a smile. "I've just taken the first steps toward rebuilding my life." I told him about my visit to the bank. About the money Andrew had secretly withdrawn, and about the new apartment I had just rented. Attorney Harris listened attentively, nodding with approval. "You've acted with remarkable determination and clarity," he said when I finished. "Many people in your situation would be paralyzed by fear. But you've done the opposite. You've taken back control." "I had to," I said, "for Edward, for myself, and for the life we built together. Now, for the remaining matter," he said, pulling out a file folder. "Here's the updated property deed with your name, along with the documents for the land and the company shares." We reviewed every page carefully. When we finished, Mr. Harris looked at me seriously. "The only question left is, what do you intend to do about your son? Do you plan to press charges for misappropriation of assets?" That question, even though I had already considered it, still weighed heavily on me. Despite the betrayal, taking my own son to court was hard to accept. "I haven't decided yet," I admitted. "First, I want to confront him. I want to hear it from his own mouth. Maybe there's some explanation." Mr. Harris nodded with understanding, though his eyes made it clear he doubted there would be any reasonable excuse. "It's up to you," he said, "but be ready for any reaction. Your son may act remorseful, or he might become hostile once he's exposed." "I know," I sighed. "I know my son, or at least I thought I did." "When do you plan to speak with him?" "Tomorrow," I said firmly, "at their dinner party." Mr. Harris raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? It could get awkward in front of others." "That's exactly why," I said. "With witnesses, Andrew will have to restrain himself. He won't dare get angry or threaten me." Mr. Harris chuckled softly. "A bold strategy, but quite effective, I must admit." "I also think," I added, the corners of my lips lifting slightly, "after they told me to stay hidden during that party, I deserve a truly memorable entrance." "Your husband was right, Mr." Harris laughed. "You're far stronger than you look." Leaving the office with all the documents safely in my bag, I felt both anxious and at peace. Every piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. The plan was ready. Tomorrow, I would face my son and reclaim my dignity, my assets, and my future. I returned home after dark. Stepping quietly, I went straight up to the attic without seeing anyone. In my small room, I carefully hid all the documents and the keys to my new apartment. As I got ready for bed, I thought about everything I had accomplished in just one day. I had secured my money, found a new home, and taken the first step toward independence. Edward would be so proud. "Tomorrow is the day," I whispered, looking at my husband's photo on the nightstand. "After that, nothing will ever be the same again." And for the first time since being banished to the attic, the thought of change no longer scared me. It filled me with anticipation. Saturday morning, the sky was gray and heavy, as if nature itself sensed the emotional storm that was about to unfold. I woke up early. After an unusually peaceful sleep, the certainty of what I had to do had swept away every trace of worry. From the attic window, I watched the scene below. Servers coming and going, carrying tables, crystal glasses, and large vases of flowers. Melissa stood in the middle, commanding everything like a general, checking each tiny detail. I decided to stay in my room all morning, avoiding both her and Andrew so nothing would jeopardize my plan. All morning, I reviewed my documents, rehearsed my words, and prepared for every possible reaction. By noon, I heard the sound of a car engine. Through the window, I saw Andrew coming home, carrying bags of expensive wine. Soon after, a flower delivery truck arrived. Melissa immediately began directing where each bouquet should go. By 5 p.m., laughter and clattering echoed through the lower floor. I began to get ready. I chose the deep wine-colored dress, the one Edward had given me for my last birthday with him. A pair of comfortable heels, my mother's pearl necklace, and a touch of the perfume Edward used to love. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman, no longer the fragile mother willing to be pushed aside. Now, in front of me stood Rebecca Miller, a woman in control of her own destiny. I placed the important documents in my purse, my weapon, my shield, and my undeniable proof. With them, I would expose my son's betrayal and reclaim my right to live with dignity. 7 p.m. The sound of cars and laughter filled the air. The clinking of glasses, the soft hum of music. The party had begun, according to what I'd overheard Melissa say. I remembered what my dear friend Carla once joked. You'll be like Cinderella, except instead of running away at midnight, you'll make your grand entrance when no one expects it. I smiled at the image. Yes, it would be a dramatic entrance. But unlike the fairy tale, this woman wasn't coming to flee the ball. She was coming to reclaim her kingdom. 8:10 p.m. I took a deep breath and began walking down the outdoor staircase. When I reached the garden, I could see through the window the bright lights of the party inside. The living room and dining room, places that once belonged to me, had been turned into a lavish stage. Tables draped in crisp white linens, crystal glasses sparkling, fresh flowers glowing under soft light, and elegantly dressed guests laughing over wine. In the center of the room, Andrew and Melissa played the role of perfect hosts, basking in the compliments from their guests. My son, wearing a suit that cost more than several months of my pension, stood there, smiling proudly, completely unaware of the storm waiting just beyond the doorway. I entered through the back door that led into the kitchen. The catering staff looked surprised, but didn't dare say a word. I walked straight toward the dining room, where Melissa was announcing, "Please, everyone, take your seats. Dinner will be served shortly." I stopped at the doorway, observing the scene before me. Melissa was arranging seats for each guest, paying extra attention to an older gentleman who seemed important, likely her company's vice president. Andrew laughed confidently, pouring wine as if he owned the entire world. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows, into the warm light of the party room. "Good evening, everyone," I said clearly, my voice firm. The effect was immediate. All conversations ceased. Every pair, all of eyes turned toward me, but I only cared about two, Andrew's and Melissa's. I watched their faces change from surprise to fear to sheer panic. "Mom!" Andrew blurted out, nearly dropping the wine bottle in his hand. "What are you doing here? Why did you come down?" Melissa recovered faster, walking toward me with a strained smile. "Mrs. Miller, we didn't expect you to join us. Are you all right? Do you need anything?" "I'm perfectly fine. Thank you," I replied with a faint smile. "I just wanted to meet your guests. After all, this is still my house." A heavy silence filled the room. The guests exchanged confused glances, unsure what was happening. The man I assumed was Melissa's boss stepped forward, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. I'm Mr. Collins, the vice president at the company where Melissa works. I didn't realize you lived here as well." "I've lived here for 45 years, Mr. Collins," I said, shaking his hand. "My husband Edward and I built this house with our own hands when we were young. Every corner holds a piece of our story." Melissa quickly interjected, her tone tight. "Rebecca, is Andrew's mother. She lives in a separate part of the house and usually doesn't join our social gatherings. I smirked, my voice laced with bitterness. A separate part, huh? That's a fancy way of saying the scorching attic, isn't it, Melissa? The atmosphere in the room turned thick and uneasy. I noticed several women among the guests exchanging disapproving looks. Andrew rushed over, gripping my hand tightly, trying to maintain his composure. Mom, you're confusing everyone. Why don't you go upstairs and rest? I'll bring your dinner later. I gently pulled my hand away, still smiling calmly. I'm perfectly clear-headed, son. I'm just telling the truth. 3 months ago, you convinced me to give up the main bedroom and move to the attic, saying it would be better for me. Since then, you've remodeled the entire house, thrown away my keepsakes, and as I recently discovered, tried to take legal ownership of the property. Gasps rippled through the room. Andrew's expression shifted from panic to anger. Mom, you're confused, he said, pretending to sound concerned. It's not what you think. Oh, isn't it? I asked, opening my purse and pulling out a thick folder. So you didn't withdraw over $500,000 from the account Edward left for me over the past 3 years, right? Here are the bank statements, black and white. Melissa's face turned pale, her lips trembling. A man with glasses, probably Mr. Collins's subordinate, cleared his throat awkwardly. I think this is a private family matter. Perhaps we should give them some space. No, please stay, I said softly. In fact, your presence is very important. Witnesses are always necessary in situations like this. I turned to Andrew, his eyes burned with a mix of anger and fear. My son, I have always loved you unconditionally. I gave you everything: education, affection, sacrifice. When Edward passed away, I trusted you completely, and that was the greatest mistake of my life. Andrew tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand to silence him. I know everything. The money transfers, the plan to take the house, and even the letters from the lawyer that you intercepted. He dropped the act, exhaling sharply. Mom, I did all of this for you. This house is too big. You can't live alone. You need to be taken care of. You need people around you. Oh, I see, I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. So that's why you spent my money on a trip to Hawaii and a brand new car, right? That's why you hide me whenever guests come over, as if I were something shameful in my own home, Melissa, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to regain composure. Ladies and gentlemen, this must be a misunderstanding. Rebecca is still going through a difficult time after losing her husband, and sometimes she gets confused about things. I'm sorry for this scene. I lifted my head, my voice steady and clear. I'm not confused. I have clear evidence. This house legally belongs to me, as does the money you two have been spending. Edward's lawyer has confirmed everything. Mr. Collins, Melissa's boss, stood up awkwardly and gestured to his wife. We'd better go. This is clearly a family issue that needs to be handled privately. One by one, the guests began murmuring apologies and quietly left the table. Melissa tried to stop them, but it was useless. Her elegant dinner party had completely collapsed. All her efforts to impress her superiors had turned into a disaster. When the last guest walked out, Andrew spun toward me, his face twisted with rage. Are you happy now? You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea how important tonight was for Melissa? And do you have any idea how important my dignity is to me? I replied calmly. This is my independence, the home that Edward and I built with our own hands. Melissa, pale with fury, snapped, You've always been a burden, Rebecca. From the very beginning, you brought nothing but old furniture, outdated memories, and Edward's ghost. Andrew and I deserve to live our own lives, not in your shadow. Her cruel words didn't shock me. I'd always known that's how she felt. She just finally said it out loud. "This house is mine," I said firmly, holding up the ownership papers. "Legal, clear, and indisputable, and I want both of you out." Andrew stared at me, as if I'd gone mad. "What are you talking about, Mom? This is our house now. We invested in it, renovated it, made it beautiful, modern, with my money," I said coldly. "Every dollar spent on those renovations came from the account Edward left for me, the one you secretly drained without ever asking for my permission." "Dad would have wanted this house upgraded," Andrew argued, grasping at his last excuse. "He always said he wanted a new kitchen, wanted to refresh everything. What your father never wanted to see," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "was his son treating his own mother like a useless burden. Edward loved you deeply, Andrew. He was so proud of the man you had become. So tell me, if he were still alive, what do you think he'd say seeing you like this?" I caught a brief flicker of shame cross Andrew's face, but it quickly vanished, replaced by that familiar, stubborn look. "You can't throw us out," he said, his voice rising. "You have nowhere else to go. You need us." I looked straight into my son's eyes. "You're wrong, Andrew." I took out the keys to my new apartment. "I already have my own place, small, but mine. And this time, the one leaving this house won't be me. It'll be you two." Melissa let out a mocking laugh. "You can't be serious. We've been living here for months. We have a right to be here." "The only right you have," I said coldly, "is the one I allowed. And now, I'm taking it back. I've already spoken with attorney Michael Harris. I'm giving you 1 month to move out. And if we don't," Melissa challenged, her voice sharp with anger, "I'll file charges against Andrew for fraud and embezzlement," I said, my eyes fixed on my son. "I have all the evidence copies of the bank withdrawals and the letters you intercepted between me and your father's lawyer. Tell me, Andrew, how do you think that will affect your career as an accountant?" Andrew's face went pale. In his profession, even a single accusation of financial fraud could destroy a career forever. "Mom, you wouldn't do that," he said softly, more pleading than certain. "I don't want to," I admitted. "You're still my son, and I still love you. But I won't let you keep exploiting me or dishonor your father's memory any longer. The choice is yours. Leave peacefully, or face the legal consequences of what you've done." The room sank into tense silence. Melissa looked at Andrew, clearly waiting for him to come up with some kind of defense. But my son only bowed his head. The arrogance once in his eyes was gone. "Mom," his voice trembled, "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say right now," I replied calmly. "Use the next few days to think about what you've done, about the son you used to be and the man you've become, about the values your father and I tried to teach you." I turned and started up the stairs. This would be one of my last nights in the attic, but I no longer felt like a prisoner. "I'll be upstairs," I said, pausing on the first step. "Tomorrow, we'll discuss how the two of you will move out. Good night." As I climbed, I heard Melissa whisper angrily to Andrew, but I didn't care anymore. I had said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done. The rest was up to them. In my small room, I sat on the bed, my heart filled with a swirl of emotions, sadness for the son I once loved, but also relief and pride. For the first time in many years, I was completely in control of my own life. "I did it, Edward," I whispered, looking at my husband's photo. "I reclaimed our home, our legacy, and myself." Outside, a light rain was falling, washing away the remnants of the ruined party. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, the first day in the life of a woman who was free and in control of her own destiny. And for the first time since Edward's passing, I felt I truly had a future worth living for. The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet. Normally, on Sundays, the place would be filled with noise. Andrew and Melissa waking up late, cooking an elaborate breakfast, playing jazz, reading the paper. But today, there was only silence. I took my time getting ready, savoring the calm that spread through my heart. No more anxiety, no more fear. All the cards were on the table. I had spoken the truth and reclaimed what was mine. The rest was up to Andrew to face the consequences. Around 10 a.m., I went downstairs. The house still bore the traces of last night's failed party. Half-empty wine glasses, crumpled napkins, wilting flowers in vases. The cleaning staff hadn't yet returned. Everything felt frozen in time, like an unfinished photograph. In the kitchen, I found Andrew sitting alone in front of a cold cup of coffee. He looked up when I entered. His eyes were red and swollen. He must have been up all night, maybe even crying. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who used to run to me for comfort after a nightmare. But now, that boy had grown into the man who betrayed his mother's trust. "Good morning," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Mom." Andrew's voice was hoarse. "We need to talk." I sat down across from him, the coffee cup in my hands like a shield. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath, as if gathering every ounce of courage. I have no excuse. At first, it was just a little. After Dad's funeral, we needed money for a few expenses. I found the account documents and thought it was temporary, that I'd tell you later, but I didn't. "No," I interrupted. Instead of stopping, you kept withdrawing more and more. "Yes," he admitted, lowering his head, unable to look at me. The money was right there. It looked so easy to take. Then Melissa wanted a bigger house, fancier furniture, more luxurious vacations. Our apartment seemed so small, compared to this place every time we visited you on Sundays. "So you decided to take this house for yourselves?" I asked, unable to hide the disappointment. "At first it was Melissa's idea," Andrew confessed. "She said it was wasteful for you to live alone in such a big house. If we moved in, we'd save money and be closer to take care of you." It sounded reasonable then. It really did. I thought it would be good for everyone. And the idea of banishing me to the attic? That was hers too? I asked sharply. Andrew's face flushed as he avoided my eyes. "She said we needed privacy, that having you always around would make married life uncomfortable. The attic was the perfect solution. You'd have your own space and still be close to us. And what about the property documents, your plan to transfer ownership to yourselves?" I pressed on. "That came later," Andrew muttered. "The bank refused to give us a renovation loan because the house wasn't in our names. Melissa looked into it and found out that legally, it was only under Dad's name. The lawyer said that as his son, I could request a transfer of ownership. Yes, if I didn't have papers proving joint ownership," I said coldly. At that moment, a chill ran down my spine. Everything had been so carefully calculated. My own son had been ready to take away his mother's home, all for greed and convenience. And what about the letters from attorney Michael Harris that you deliberately blocked? Andrew ran a trembling hand through his hair. "They came not long after Dad's funeral," he said, his voice shaking. "Melissa saw them first and opened them. When we realized they were letters from Dad's lawyer about the inheritance, we got scared. If you found out about the secret account, if you knew we had used that money, so you hid everything, made me believe I was broke, that I had to depend on the so-called kindness of you two?" I cut in sharply. "It wasn't calculated like that," Andrew protested weakly. "It just happened. And you never thought about the consequences, about how deeply you were hurting me? I asked, my voice tight with emotion. Andrew was silent for a long moment before finally saying, his voice cracking, I thought I was doing what was best for you, that you wouldn't have to worry about money or paperwork, because I'm just an old, useless woman, incapable of handling her own life, right? I interrupted bitterly. No, Mom. That's not what I... Andrew tried to defend himself, but his head dropped when he saw the cold look in my eyes. Or maybe it's partly true, he whispered at last. I was terribly wrong. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Melissa appeared fully dressed, her face cold, her eyes radiating that false sense of control. Unlike Andrew, she showed no remorse, only anger and calculation. Good morning, she said coolly. I see you two have already talked. I looked at her, but said nothing. Andrew tensed up, clearly uneasy about his wife's presence. Melissa and I talked last night, he said. About everything. And about your ultimatum. It's not an ultimatum, I corrected calmly. It's a fair consequence for what you both have done. Melissa let out a short, mocking laugh, then poured herself a cup of coffee. Leaning against the counter and watching us like an audience member observing a play she still believed she could control. We'll move out, Andrew said. We'll find another place as soon as possible. But, are you really going to press charges against me? The question hung in the air, heavy with fear. I saw the panic in my son's eyes. A single charge of financial fraud would be enough to destroy his entire career and reputation. That depends, I said after a brief silence. First, you'll have to return all the money you withdrew without my consent. We don't have $500,000 left, Melissa snapped. Most of it went into renovations, and the rest into daily expenses. Then you'll create a repayment plan, I said firmly. Attorney Michael Harris will help set up the legal terms. Andrew nodded, defeated. All right. We'll pay it back. Every penny. I promise. And second, I continued, I want a sincere apology not just for the money, but for the way you both treated me, banishing me to the attic, erasing me from my own home, making me feel like nothing but a burden. Andrew lowered his head, eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mom. Truly sorry. There's no excuse for the way I treated you. I should have respected you more, honored you the way you deserve. Melissa remained still, her face expressionless, her eyes empty. It was clear that if she did apologize, it would be nothing more than a hollow formality. I didn't force it. Whatever bond had once existed between us was now completely broken. And one last thing, I said, my voice low but firm. Take a good look at the people you've become. Greedy, deceitful, ungrateful. Those are not the values your father and I raised you with. Andrew, your father would be deeply disappointed. Those words struck him harder than any threat ever could. I saw his eyes redden, his face twist in pain. I know, he whispered. I don't even know when I started losing my way like this. Melissa, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional tension, cut in coldly. So, you won't press charges if we follow your conditions, right? I met her eyes, my tone steady. If you both repay the money as agreed and respect my ownership, there will be no legal action. But make no mistake, this is not open to negotiation or compromise. You've crossed a line. Is that clear? Clear, Melissa said curtly. How long do we have to find a new place? 1 month, I repeated. And you may take everything you bought yourselves, but everything that belonged to Edward and me stays here. Andrew nodded, accepting my terms. Thank you, Mom, for not taking this further. I didn't do it for you, I said calmly. I did it for your father's memory. He always believed in second chances, and I did it for myself. Because I don't want to spend my final years fighting a legal battle against my own son. An uneasy silence filled the kitchen. Finally, Melissa spoke. Maybe we should start looking for an apartment today, Andrew. I'll make some calls. Without waiting for a reply, she walked out, leaving the two of us alone in the cold kitchen. Andrew sat there, looking exhausted, as if the weight of his guilt had finally crashed down on his shoulders. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, he murmured, softly. Forgiveness takes time, I said honestly. And it takes real change, not just words, but actions. I understand, Andrew nodded. I'll do everything I can to earn back your trust. Even if it takes years. One step at a time, Andrew, I said, standing up. For now, focus on fixing what's in front of you. In the weeks that followed, I watched them prepare to move out. They found a small apartment in the suburbs of Portland and began packing. Melissa kept her distance, speaking only when necessary. Andrew, on the other hand, tried to help, asking if I needed anything, offering to carry boxes, fixing small things around the house. I kept my distance. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But I noticed a genuine change in my son's demeanor. His arrogance had been replaced by humility, his indifference by care. Whether that change would last or fade with time, only time would tell. One afternoon, while I was sorting through Edward's wardrobe, deciding what to do with his belongings, Andrew appeared in the doorway. Can I help? He asked softly. I looked at my son, about to refuse. But there was something fragile in his eyes that made me change my mind. All right, I said. I'm planning to donate some of your father's suits to the church. There are families who could use them. Andrew stepped in, carefully taking each suit off the hanger. We worked in silence for a while, until he picked up an old gray sweater Edward used to wear around the house. I remember this one, he said softly, brushing his hand over the wool. Dad wore it every Christmas Eve, when he told the night before Christmas before we opened presents. The memory hit me hard, Edward, in that sweater, sitting by the small tree, telling stories to a little Andrew waiting eagerly for his gifts. You can keep it if you want, I said. Andrew looked up, his eyes wet. Really? You think Dad would want me to have it? Yes, I believe he would. He held the sweater tightly against his chest. Thank you, Mom. This means a lot to me. That small moment, fragile as it was, planted a seed of hope. Maybe, with time and genuine effort, we could mend at least part of what had been broken. Moving day finally came. A moving truck was parked by the gate. Melissa supervised the loading with her usual cold precision, checking every box, ordering the workers around. Andrew found me in the kitchen, where I was making tea just to keep my hands busy. We're almost done, he said. Just a few personal boxes left. I nodded, unsure what to say. Despite everything, there was still a twinge of sadness watching my son leave. After all, he was still my only child. Mom, Andrew continued, we made arrangements with the bank to start paying the money back. Attorney Michael Harris has all the details. We'll keep our word. Good, I said, pouring tea. And I also wanted to tell you. Melissa and I talked about everything, about how we treated you. I'll ask honestly, is she still angry? Of course, Andrew said with a faint, sad smile. She feels like we lost too much. But I've been thinking about what you said, about the values you and Dad taught me, about the man I've become. He paused, trying to stay composed. I don't like who I've been these past few years. That wasn't me. For the first time in a long while, I saw pure sincerity in his eyes. No pretense, no calculation. Just my son, finally facing his own mistakes. Recognizing your mistakes, I said softly, is the first step toward change. Your father used to say that. I remember, Andrew smiled faintly. Mom, I know I can't erase the past, but I want to start making things right, little by little, if you'll let me. I took a sip of tea, looking at him, weighing my words. Time will tell, Andrew. Words are easy, but actions are what define a person. I understand, Andrew said, nodding, and I'll prove it through my actions that I can change and become the son you deserve. Just then, Melissa appeared in the doorway. Andrew, the movers are ready. Check if there's anything important you might have forgotten. Melissa glanced at me briefly, her expression hard to read, not exactly hostile, but a mixture of irritation and reluctant respect. Mrs. Rebecca, she said, her voice restrained, I wish you all the best. It was probably the kindest goodbye I could expect from her. I wish you the same, Melissa, I replied, my tone cool but polite. As she left, Andrew turned back to me one last time. I'll call often to check on you if you'll let me. I'd like that, I admitted. Suddenly, Andrew stepped forward and hugged me. I froze for a moment, then wrapped my arms around him. It wasn't full forgiveness yet, but it was the first step toward something new. I love you, Mom, he whispered into my hair. No matter what happened, I never stopped loving you. I love you too, son, I said, allowing myself a moment of softness. I'll always love you, no matter what. He pulled away, wiped a quiet tear from his cheek, and walked out of the kitchen. A few minutes later, I heard the moving truck start up, its sound fading into the distance. I went to the window, saw Andrew's car following behind the truck, carrying them both toward a new life. The house fell silent. But this time, it was a comforting silence, a stillness filled with possibility, with new beginnings. Looking out at the empty road where they had just driven away, I knew that one chapter of my life had closed and another, just as important, was beginning. A year has passed since that fateful night, the confrontation that changed the course of all our lives. The house, my house, has once again become a home, not quite the same as when Edward was alive, filling every corner with warmth, but still a home that belongs entirely to me. I decided not to move into the small apartment I had rented in that moment of impulsive independence, because, after all, this house holds my entire life, the sweet memories and the bitter ones alike. Every wall, every object, every patch of flowers in the garden tells the story of the life Edward and I built together. I couldn't abandon it, but I did transform it. With part of the money Edward left me, I hired an architect to renovate the attic, no longer a place of exile, but a bright art studio. Every afternoon, I go there to paint. Yes, I've returned to painting, the passion I'd set aside for decades because of family life. It turns out that at 68, my hands are still steady and my eyes still sharp enough to see the beauty in the world. The first floor of the house is warm again. I got rid of everything Melissa had imposed and brought back the old wooden furniture Edward and I once chose together. Family photos hang on the walls again. But I've added new touches, 2 personal details that reflect this new chapter of my life. As for Andrew and Melissa, our relationship has changed in ways I never could have imagined. As promised, they've been paying back the money every month, without fail. By my calculations, it will take about 8 more years to repay it all. But at least they're keeping their word. Andrew has changed, not overnight, of course. Real change is never instant. It's a slow process, filled with stumbles and steps backward. At first, his visits were awkward, filled with silence and hesitation. But over time, we found a new rhythm, a way to talk built on mutual respect. One afternoon, about 3 months after they moved out, Andrew came to visit, alone. He brought an apple pie from my favorite bakery and asked, "Can we talk for a bit, Mom?" Then he told me something that truly surprised me. He had started going to therapy to face his greed, to understand why he had treated me the way he did. "I want to know why I did it," he said. "Not just so you can forgive me, but so I can forgive myself and never hurt anyone like that again." For the first time since that night of confrontation, I felt a deep sense of relief, a genuine hope that my son was rediscovering the man we once raised him to be. As for Melissa, she kept her distance. She only came with Andrew on special occasions, birthdays, Christmas. Our relationship remained polite, and I expected nothing more. I didn't need more. I've learned that not every relationship can or should be repaired. Some are meant to evolve into something different, less intimate, but more peaceful. As for me, life has expanded. I reconnected with old friends. Like Catherine, my college friend from Chicago. I joined a local book club at the library and enrolled in an art class at the Senior Arts Center. For the first time in decades, I have a social life of my own, not revolving around family. I also began traveling. At first, just short trips a few days in Salem, Oregon, then to Portland, Maine, to admire its historic architecture and vibrant gardens. And as I grew more confident, I went farther. 6 months ago, I finally took the European trip Edward and I had always dreamed of. I went to Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. In each city, I carried a small jar holding a bit of Edward's ashes. At every special place, before every beautiful view, I scattered a little, fulfilling the silent promise I made to him when he was ill, that we would see the world together one way or another. Michael Harris, my attorney, has become an essential part of my life, not just a legal advisor, but a trusted friend. He helps me manage my finances, make investment decisions, and ensure my future. Thanks to his guidance, I haven't just preserved what Edward left me, I've made it grow. A month ago, I made an important decision. I wrote my own will. Unlike Edward's, there's nothing vague or open to interpretation. Everything is clear and in perfect order. Most of my estate will go to Andrew. Yes, despite everything, he is still my son, and I still love him. But I've also set aside a significant portion for charity, especially a center that helps older women, abandoned by their families. I know too well how fragile a woman's life can become at this age, with no income, no support. This morning, as I was watering the rose bushes in the garden that was once ours and is now simply mine, I got a call from Andrew. Melissa is pregnant. I'm going to be a grandmother. The news filled me with mixed emotions, joy, of course, because a grandchild is a priceless gift, but also concern. Will Andrew and Melissa be mature enough to be parents? Has my son truly changed enough to raise a child with integrity? Or will he repeat the mistakes of the past? When I gently shared those worries, Andrew said something that deeply moved me. "I think about that every day, Mom," he admitted. "That's why I'm trying so hard to change. I don't want to be to my child what I was to you. I want to be the kind of father Dad was: honest, hardworking, loving." Those words filled me with hope. Perhaps the innocent child, soon to be born, would be the final spark that helped Andrew complete his transformation. That afternoon, after the call, I went up to my attic studio. This time, I wasn't painting landscapes or still lifes, but a family portrait, drawn from memory. Edward, Andrew, and me, on those Sunday afternoons in the park, back when we were happy, naive, and unaware of how the future would test us. As I painted, I thought about the strange journey of my life, especially these past few years, how the pain of betrayal became the fire that led to my rebirth. I had to lose almost everything: my husband, my son, my dignity, to rediscover my strength and my true worth. Edward once told me I was an oak disguised as a flower. Now I understand. I am stronger than I ever thought, more resilient than anyone imagined. I just needed storms big enough to awaken that strength. Now, at 68, I feel more alive than ever. I've learned that it's never too late to start over, to recreate oneself. I've learned that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves not only to those who've hurt us, but to free our own hearts. And above all, I've learned that life, even in its final chapters, can still be full of miracles, of new beginnings, and unexpected joys. My son once sent me to the attic, never realizing that inside Edward's last drawer, I would find not just papers and money, but a reminder of my self-worth, of my right to be respected, to live with dignity. And on the path to reclaim what was mine, I found something even more precious myself. When I finished the family portrait and watched the paint slowly dry, I thought about the future, about the grandchild soon to be born, about the stories I would tell them of their grandfather Edward and the lessons I hoped to pass on. I thought about the trips I still want to take, the paintings I've yet to create, the books I've yet to read. Life goes on with its light and darkness, its joy and sorrow, and I go with it no longer as a bystander, but as the author of my own story. A story that, I now realize, is far from over. The sun began to set, bathing my studio in shades of golden orange. From the attic, once my prison, now a sanctuary of peace, I could see the whole city of Portland stretching before me, the lights flickering in distant windows, lives continuing alongside my own. I lifted my cup of tea and whispered a quiet blessing for Edward, who still watches over me from somewhere beyond, for Andrew, who is finding his way back, for the child soon to be born, and for myself, Rebecca Miller, who has just realized that the most moving chapter of her life is only beginning. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real experiences, with names and settings changed. But the emotions, the pain, the betrayal, and the strength of rediscovery remain true. Rebecca chose to stand up, to reclaim her voice and her dignity, rather than let silence bury everything. And you? If you were in her place, cast out of your own home, betrayed by those you love, would you stay silent or speak up? Sometimes, speaking up isn't just about seeking justice, it's about saving your own soul. May God bless all those walking through trials that seem impossible to overcome, so they too may find the light, as Rebecca did. Thank you for watching until the end. Stay with us and choose one of the 2 videos on the end screen. You might just find a piece of yourself in them.